Welcome to another episode of the Relationship Toolbox, a show about the skills we need to build healthy relationships with others. Have any of you had this experience where you may have had a conversation with perhaps your spouse or your life partner, a conversation that didn't go very well? And perhaps this was with your child, or maybe with your boss or a colleague at work, or maybe even your best friend. And as you look back on this, you think, oh, how in the world did I say all those things? I can't believe what I was doing. I talked as if I had no filter on my mouth. And you realize, I'm going to have to do some apologizing, and hopefully I can save this relationship with it, or at least heal it. So that's the type of topic that we're going to be discussing today, about the impact of sleep deprivation on our relationships with others and in our life. So we have someone here to really help us, knows a lot more about it. And Marsha, would you?
I don't have a great relationship with sleep. I wish I had a better one. So I'm glad that we have somebody who knows about that. And today we have Dr. Judith Fisch with us, right from Rutland, from the Green Mountain Dental Sleep Center, who works with this. And maybe you could tell us a little bit more about what you do, and then we can link it to what we want to know about sleep.
Sure. I'm a general dentist. I've practiced here for over 30 years as a general dentist, and I, in the past, say 3 or 4 years, became interested in what we refer to as dental sleep medicine. So when patients are having sleep issues and say they're using CPAP for obstructive sleep apnea, but they become intolerant to it or have difficulties with using it, dental sleep medicine is providing oral appliances that help to bring the jaw forward to a certain point that helps to open the airway so they can breathe better. So it's working more mechanically. So I became very interested in that aspect of dentistry because it connects itself with sleep, which is such a very important part of our life. So I took some additional training through the American Academy of Dental Sleep Medicine, and with that comes a lot of learning about sleep and the sleep cycles and how it affects people.
So I only know about my own anecdotal experiences, but I know that when I haven't slept well, I'm less patient, I'm less articulate, I'm less calm, I'm less creative, and I can even be snarky, I've been told. And so it has to do, bad sleep health can affect my mental health, which is going to affect who I bring to any kind of interpersonal activity. What is it that happens to us physically when we don't get enough sleep?
Well, the body has to go through various different stages of sleep that cycle throughout the night. And Mother Nature has figured out that that process needs about 8 hours to completely go through each stage of sleep. As time has gone by, we as a society, as an industrialized nation, most people, 1 in 5 people do not get enough sleep. In the 1940s, the average amount of sleep was 8.9 hours a night. Today, the average amount of sleep an adult has is 6.5 hours.
Wow.
So what happens is when you're going through the layers of deep sleep, and if you're not getting enough of that, if you're not getting those 8 hours to fully get through those cycles, the brain cannot process everything efficiently and in the same way as it needs the 8 hours to do so. So essentially what can happen to people is a variety of things, but from an emotional standpoint, your reaction time changes. You might react way too quickly. You might interpret someone inappropriately or incorrectly. You may respond inappropriately in different situations. For example, start to laugh or giggle at something that really isn't funny, or to be feeling more moody or more irritable. And that's basically because the brain has not had that time to process everything that has gone on throughout your day, to compartmentalize everything that you've learned and put it into another portion of the brain. And so when that's either disrupted or prevented from not having enough time to do that, this is when we start to see the reactions
breakdown,
and the consequences as a result of that.
So I hear you say, sorry, Tom.
Go ahead.
I hear you say two things, that your ability to self-regulate like you normally do is impaired, but also the learning piece. Talk to me about the learning piece. I had a student come in today and said, I haven't slept in 30 hours. And like, that isn't safe, first of all, but she's been...
Well, there's been a fair amount of research in sleep about the fact that you need to have a significant number of hours of sleep, the 8 hours, prior to learning, but then also after learning, so that the brain can process what you've learned and take short-term memory items and put it into a part of the brain that will reserve it more long-term. And it helps the body and the brain to absorb the knowledge you're learning when it's had the 8 hours of sleep, when the body and brain have had that time to process everything. So to pull an all-nighter has been proven that you just effectively cannot absorb the information nor retain it.
So what good is it education if you can't retain it? Then really
Right,
have to learn
right.
it.
And many times, depending on the age at which someone is at in their life, an adolescent, a teenager requires more hours of sleep because so much growth and development is occurring, but also to process everything. But yet, at certain ages, be it college age or senior in high school, pressures, and we also begin to think we're infallible, that I can get away with it.
Yeah.
I can do it.
Those rules are for other people, not for me.
Right.
I can do it. And it's almost a badge, like, oh, I can get by with 5 or 6 hours.
Well, I think that is where we have come as a society and as an industrialized nation, in that we pride ourselves on, I can accomplish this on 5 or 6 hours of sleep. And the reality there is that it's going to catch up with you at some point in time. It may not right away, or it may be that you realize that today I don't feel so great, but as the years go by, it compounds itself.
That's what I was going to ask you. Is there a long-term physiological or neurological effect on the brain when this continues for a long period of time?
There can be effects on various parts of the body, on the brain in the sense that such as depression, anxiety can be worsened, schizophrenia, bipolar, any disorders from a psychiatric standpoint would only be worsened through the years with a lack of enough hours for the brain to process correctly.
What about memory? What does, we talk about academic memory, but I'm just talking about functional memory. It feels like maybe sleep has something to do with that too.
Well, it does, because you need the time to get into deep sleep. And so sleep occurs in those stages for different amounts of time. But to get into the layers of deep sleep is when the body kind of takes the knowledge that you've learned today and processes it and might store it in another part of the brain where it saves that information. Almost like a computer works, where you might have the USB drive that has the information on it, but now another part of the computer is retaining and saving that information.
Like
Sort of like we could make links then with our brain in the future with some of that information if it has been stored that well.
Right, right. And so they just show that you're going to retain the information, understand the information, and process it better if you have a full night of sleep. And of course, you need more sleep at different points in your life.
Yeah, can you tell us a little more about that? Because I'm interested in that.
Well, for example, an infant sleeps an incredible amount of time.
Except not through the night.
Except not through the night. Same for toddlers. And then as you get into your adolescent and teenage years, because of, again, all of the growth and development changes, you require more than 8 hours of sleep. And yet, many times we'll look at that as, well, you're being lazy if you slept later than a certain period of time. We, as a society, have kind of stigmatized that. But as we then are in our adult years, we need, say, 8 hours of sleep a night. But then as we continue to age and we're in our elderly years, the body struggles more with those sleep cycles and keeping you in those sleep cycles. So sleep becomes more fragmented and more challenging at a later point in life.
I've known some people who, my father was one who could take a nap midday and come away feeling very refreshed. So I could never do that. But is that a way of getting some of this sleep, or is that still not helping because you're not getting deep sleep?
Well, it can in certain situations where someone, say, routinely takes a nap, routinely every day, routinely maybe at the same time or for the same amount of time, that might be beneficial. But when there are sporadic naps and your body kind of begins to get into a layer of sleep and then you come to because you can't continue to sleep, then that's disrupted, and then might you not be able to fall to sleep in the evening at your regular time to get your 8 hours of sleep. So that can be kind of tricky.
So I think that we see sleep deprivation for lifestyle reasons, kids with electronics or just pushing that envelope. And there may be stages of life, like new parents, or you're a shift worker. But there are physical reasons, it sounds like, through your dental medicine. What are some of the physical reasons that somebody might not sleep, that they may not even know about?
Right. And so many times people will wake up multiple times a night and think they need to use the bathroom. Essentially, if you're not getting enough oxygen throughout the night, so say you're having some obstructions where you, the patient, are not aware of it. Your spouse may hear you snoring, your spouse may hear some gasping sounds, but you, the patient, aren't necessarily aware of it. And as that occurs, that is decreasing the oxygen. So the body and the brain will start to wake you up. You might have more of this interruption in sleep that you don't come fully awake, but that can be documented through a sleep study that shows how many times your sleep is disrupted throughout the night. And that becomes a cumulative piece in that some people, if that's not treated, it only begins to worsen as we continue to get older, and we have more of a relaxation of muscles and ligaments, and the airway can be blocked depending on a variety of things. The size of the mouth, the size of the tongue, are tonsils present, are there other respiratory issues, is someone, the way the oxygen is coming through and more mouth breathing rather than nasal breathing. So there can be a variety of issues that interfere and interrupt one's sleep.
So how does a person know if they're just tired or whether they have sleep deprivation?
Well, being just tired could be that you were really physically active that day, or you skied all day and you're tired as a result of that. But sleep deprivation or interrupted sleep, the patient will feel difficult to get out of bed in the morning, repetitively, difficulty staying focused at work, maybe feeling foggy, maybe getting somewhat kind of hypnotized while they're driving. Irritability, mood swings like that, or also when the body is deprived of sleep, it can't process from a physiological standpoint, so there might be weight gain, there might be a change in one's diet, not intentionally, but leaning more towards a carbohydrate diet, Because again, the body has not been able to process correctly.
So we start to try to compensate for it in the wrong way.
Exactly, right. And again, because some people, their occupation, they can be connected to their occupation 24/7, you know? Even though they're out of work, they can still log on or look at things. And so from a societal change and through the years with technology, we also don't wind down the same as they had to years ago.
Because we didn't have light. When the
didn't.
sun went down, you couldn't work.
That's right. And there was not all this technology to keep you
Keep stimulated.
connected.
Yeah.
And I think because we communicate and we have commerce around the globe, we're also affected by the time zones of other people that we're working with and that cross-cultural piece. We have shift workers now where you're working a 12-hour shift or you're working nights for 3 nights a week and then you're trying to fit in.
Right.
So we've stretched ourselves, which is in some ways fun, but it doesn't help us.
Well, and we've also kind of taken that as a badge of honor within
Yeah.
our
Right.
society,
Yeah.
as, you know, you can keep going. And you might think you can, but eventually Mother Nature catches up with you.
How do we give people in our world permission to interrupt that legacy of pride in being able to carry on with very little sleep, nourishment?
Well, I think there's more observation of that through the medical community as time goes on, and there's evidence of increase in disease rates and cardiac issues and diabetes and various different systemic issues that have just only extrapolated as time has gone by and our average amount of hours of sleep has decreased. But I think each person has to probably take that within themselves and accept that this is what they need to do and it's okay.
But when you're trying to be a role model, yes, I'm not trying to impose my new knowledge now on other people, but you know, as parents and as mentors,
Especially what we model as parents, because if that type of
it just
machoism is
perpetuates it,
yeah,
I think.
and children learn that oh, look what my parents did, you know, they could do it, so I guess I need to too.
The burning the candle at both ends,
Yes.
kind of like we can push through this.
Yeah.
Well, some of the scientists actually, the sleep scientists actually think that it's becoming a public health crisis, and essentially
sleep
feel
deprivation.
that there should be a public health campaign, as there is for like drunk driving or wearing your
Texting
seatbelt or you know, various other community health issues. So, and there's probably a fair amount of validity to that,
Yes.
because as you say, if a young child is only seeing what's going on at home and that's their example, might a public health campaign or measure of making this more of an awareness, especially through the schools.
Right.
And that's where some schools have chosen to begin, like rather than at 7:30, at 8:30. Some schools in different parts of the country, all
modify
for
the
this
schedule.
reason, to help and to be able to see that children learn and retain better.
I think even industries are beginning to, through the pandemic that we went through, realize that there are some advantages in people having more time to relax, do things, take breaks,
Right.
as well as there's a downside to it in terms of business.
Right,
But,
exactly.
it seems like it's a responsibility not only for parents, but for people in business as well, to make sure that their employees are aware and their actions and their demands of their employees aren't counterproductive to that knowledge.
Yes, exactly.
Are there any studies about the difference in genders, about whether
It's interesting. Yeah.
you know, men are sleeping more, or men are sleeping less, women are sleeping more, whether
I know that there are some that will show that insomnia is often mostly connected more so to women than men, and that often that's connected to anxiety, issues of anxiety, and trying to help someone work through that in the sense of, they suggest meditation or other means with which they might work through that. Men, I think, try to just pretend it's not really a big deal, because that only happens to old, overweight men, when really it can happen to anyone.
Do they try to, I would think some men may even physically attack it in the sense of get more active physically to counter that.
To counteract that, sure, yeah. And as far as women are concerned, I mean, there are hormonal changes that occur throughout your life, be it during a pregnancy or post-pregnancy, or then as you go through menopause. And with hormonal changes like that, it can begin to affect one's sleep. And so being cognizant of that and working through that, or dealing with that.
What about sleep aids other than apparatus, or some of the things the machines that you see advertised? Medication, like the over-the-counter stuff that you could take.
Well, even some I've heard are internal now. Is that I've seen an advertisement for something that is internalized.
Yes, well, there is an implantable. It's called Inspire. It's an implantable, similar to like a pacemaker, that has a lead that goes up to a specific nerve that, when the airway is being blocked at night by the tongue, it stimulates that tongue to come forward, which helps to open up the airway. So that helps in terms of obstructive sleep apnea. But essentially what it often comes down to is regularity, keeping a regular schedule, and not trying to think you can do 6 or 5 hours through the week and then catch up on the weekend, because
you can't
that's
bank
not true.
You can't bank it.
There's no banking there. Beginning to dim lights.
I was going to ask you about the effect of light.
The melatonin.
Yeah.
We have so much more light in our lives now than they had in 1940 when they were sleeping 8.9 hours. They weren't sitting on an iPad or a phone or whatever.
Yeah, not only the ambient light outside, but with city
devices.
lights, but devices,
even
screens.
Devices that during the night they have a light to indicate that they're on, or they're monitoring. I mean, it's a small amount of light, I guess, but is that also impacting us?
That can impact people as well. They've come out with like a black type of tape you can put over those, where the light might show on your the box for your cable box for your TV or something, So, but regularity in keeping the same hours of going to bed and waking. Dimming the lights about an hour before you're going to bed, starting to dim some of the lights. Stop using blue light, the phone, the iPad, the computer screen.
Don't go down
about
those
an hour before.
rabbit holes.
Keeping the room cool, because the
Temperature.
body begins to cool itself down and drop in temperature some while you're sleeping. So it's better for the body and easier to begin to sleep if the room is kept cooler.
What about personal, I guess referred to as circadian, is that correct?
Circadian rhythms.
Circadian rhythm.
Do we all have different rhythms, or is that a myth, or what? Can you tell us about that?
Well, I think the circadian rhythm, we all have a rhythm that occurs for us. It might alter somewhat individually, but again, when the sleep cycle is disturbed, that gets disturbed as well. So they kind of can go hand in hand in that respect.
But each person does have some type of rhythm that they need to pay attention to?
Yes. And again, it comes back to, you need the benefit of those 8 hours for the body and the brain to go through the process that's involved, and that therefore will affect your circadian rhythm potentially as well.
Tell us about a sleep study and what that entails if a person wants to do that.
So a sleep study, they can be done in the sleep center at the hospital, Oftentimes, they will as well give some patients a home test to do at home instead of in the hospital. And what it does is it records your pulse rate, the oxygen levels in your blood, your breathing. And if you're in the hospital, there's more leads, so it can determine the levels of sleep you're in, how long you spent in each level, how many times your sleep was disrupted, and you were disrupted. You might not have woken up, but you're breathing, and so now you have to start over again. Or how many times your oxygen was dropping in the blood below 88%. And so
you're hooked up to an
in the hospital,
yeah.
there's more that you're hooked up to. And they decide whether they believe a patient would be better for a home test or an in-house test, because for some people it can be very severe. And so sleep apnea can be life-threatening.
Yeah.
And so they determine that. And the home test doesn't monitor as much, but provides enough data to be able to know that there are some issues going on with breathing through the night.
Well, we have been enlightened. Thank you so much. Again, we're here with Dr. Judith Fisch from the Green Mountain Dental Sleep Center. So maybe this is certainly important from your physical health, but it might also be affecting your interpersonal relationships. And all of the good things that we've been talking about, all the skills about communication, may be affected just by evaluating your sleep. And maybe you're not getting enough of it.
And if you can't, we've been talking a lot about skills, communication skills, but if you don't have the wherewithal from lack of sleep to utilize the skills, then you're not addressing the correct problem.
Right, exactly.
So
right.
consider that as you are looking to improve your personal health and the health of your relationships. We thank you for joining us again on the Relationship Toolbox, and we'll see you again soon.